Our guest tonight is somebody who has made a name for himself in independent journalism for many years now, going at least back to the Obama administration, where principally he became known for doing extensive, sustained, on-the-ground reporting in Flint, Michigan, where, as some of you probably remember, there was a crisis, an ongoing crisis actually, where the water supply in Flint was poisoned, and the government, federal government, state government, didn't matter, Republican, Democrat, simply didn't seem to care much, and he was giving voice to the people in Flint. He's written a new book that is based on the reporting that he's done, the in-depth analysis of that scandal entitled Poisoned, Exposing the Flint Water Crisis Cover-Up and the Poisoning of 100,000 Americans. And at the same time, over the last year or so, or the last 6 months at least, he spent a lot of time in Michigan interviewing a crucial voting bloc, which are Muslim Americans and Arab Americans who principally reside in Michigan, trying to understand what they intend to do in the 2024 election and how the Biden-Harris policy of supporting Israel affects that. We'd like to talk to him about that as well. So we are delighted to welcome Jordan Territon to our show. Jordan, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Congratulations on the new book.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the new book. And before we get to the, let's say, substance of the book, I want to ask you about the media angle, because you're somebody, you work with the Young Turks. I think that's where you got your start. But for a long time now, you've been working completely in classic independent media. And even the Young Turks back then was hardly some big network. And you've been able to do this kind of reporting that has typically been the province of establishment media or traditional media, of doing just sustained on-the-ground interviews with people, covering meetings and city council meetings, oftentimes without much company. How have you been able to do that, and what do you think that says about the capacity of independent media to be a real alternative to traditional media?
Yeah, to the Young Turks' credit, I mean, the initial beginning of my reporting in Flint was with them. So I certainly didn't have the money, like as an individual at that time, to keep going back to Flint. So definitely I had the benefit of being with the Young Turks. After that, once I started my own outlet, Status Quo, to tell you the truth, I mean, it was really bootstraps. In the beginning, I was taking reporting trips to Flint, just kind of dipping into my own limited savings. I would drive 9-10 hours instead of flying to save money. And, a lot of it was really just kind of losing money on the front end. Not that these kind of stories make much money anyway, but it was really just kind of going into my own wallet to go there, build sources, build relationships with residents, to the point where I was able to build, a decent small dollar, paid membership to help sustain it. GoFundMe as well, small dollar membership. But it's been very difficult. And for some of the stories I broke, I think it actually took me longer to get mainstream outlets to partner with me on publishing those outlets than it did for me to actually do the reporting. So a big part of the challenge beyond just the reporting and the news gathering, building sources, obtaining documents, has been getting larger media outlets, frankly, to care and help spread the reporting.
Yeah, and my hypothesis in that case and in similar ones is that, in general, traditional media, corporate media, only covers issues or controversies where the two parties seem to be disagreeing. And you can put a Republican on, a Democrat on, and they fight with each other, and it gives the appearance that there's all kinds of free and passionate debate in our country over every issue, where you have both sides just representing completely different views. And in this case, the indifference toward the poisoned water supply in Flint came under a Democratic president, Barack Obama, who was elected basically promising to represent the people in communities like that who had been suffering. And not only did he do very little, he, as we're about to show in a video that I want to get your reaction to as well, he kind of went there and mocked the whole notion that there was something wrong there to the face of the people in that community who had a lot of high hopes when he came there. But also you had a Republican governor, Republican administration in Michigan and various state agencies, at least for part of the time, is my recollection. And so you had this kind of, no Democrats, no Republicans really were raising this problem that these people had poisoned water supply inside the United States, and no one seemed to be doing anything about it. Let me just show the audience, for people who haven't seen. This was when did Obama go to visit? 2014, was it? 2015?
2016.
2016. Okay, so here's Obama. He made a big showing out of the fact that he was going to be the president who was going to go to Flint, Michigan, kind of bring attention finally to the Flint water crisis that had been going on for quite a while. And instead, this is what he did. Let's show the video.
Now, the reason I know I'm okay is because I already had some Flint water. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt. Now, I'm going to talk about this. Everybody settle down. This is a feisty crowd.
You know, it was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen a politician. I mean, he made a big showing out of how he was going to drink the Flint water, and he kind of barely put it to his lips in about a millisecond, didn't seem to swallow anything, basically just wet his lips and put it down as a demonstration that these people's claims that they were being poisoned basically should be mocked. Why do you think there was so little interest in the part of the bipartisan ruling class in fixing a problem that obviously should not happen in the United States, that 100,000 people or so have poisoned water supply?
Yeah, there were so many levels to this cover up. And like you said, it's ongoing. I mean, to this day, there's problems with the water. There's no criminal justice. And frankly, cancer is surging in Flint. So it is an ongoing disaster that has just been whitewashed by the media, by politicians. With Obama, you know, I can't get in his head, but I really think Obama was a creature of kind of meritocracy and kind of the EPA, for example, was feeding him, you know, the lead levels are going down in Flint and everything's improving. And I think, you know, to his naivete, he trusted that, despite the fact that based on my reporting, the state of Michigan was manipulating the data. They were manipulating the water testing to get artificially lower lead levels. So do I think Obama kind of woke up in the morning and said, let me ignore those, you know, poor black people in Flint and let them continue drinking that poison water? I don't think it was that direct and malicious. I just don't think he cared that much. I don't really think he cared to investigate. I don't think he cared to do anything other than go there, you know, for a photo op and, you know, to take a sip of water. Yes, you're not going to die from taking a sip of contaminated water, but you will get very sick if you're drinking it day after day for 2 years and bathing in it for 2 years, like those residents. So I just think Obama, frankly, a stark departure from his community organizer days, just became very disconnected from the very types of communities that a lot of people thought he was going to fight for. And he trusted the wrong people who told him the situation was improving. At that time, based on my reporting, the situation and the water was actually getting worse.
So I remember from that time period and then reading your book, kind of remembering even more vividly a lot of what was happening, because this was, the Obama administration, 2016 was 8 years ago or so. There's obviously a lot that's happened since then that makes that seem very long ago. But I remember watching interviews, including I'm certain ones that you conducted with residents of Flint who the population is largely, overwhelmingly black Americans, and he was the first black president ever coming to Flint, and they had very high expectations of what he was finally going to do. They thought, okay, finally someone's recognizing our problem and is coming here. How did they react to sort of that excerpt of what we just saw, as well as just Obama's general PR trip there?
Yeah, I mean, residents to this day that I talk to, black and white, but particularly the black residents, are just frankly disgusted. Not just with Obama, also with the current governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who for, you know, a hot 5 minutes was rumored to be Biden's replacement when Biden was dropping out. She made a lot of promises to Flint when she ran for governor. They were, you know, very excited to vote for her because the Republican governor who presided over the cover-up was leaving. So they were, you know, thought that a Democrat would, at the very least, clean their water. She abandoned the promises to them. She promised to reopen the free water stations in Flint, which residents desperately depended on. You know, you remember seeing those lines of residents lined up. She didn't reopen them. She, frankly, retained most of the previous administration's officials who helped cover this whole thing up. And also her attorney general, you know, technically they're independent of each other, but based on my reporting, not so much. Her Democratic attorney general, who just spoke at the DNC and is beloved by the MSNBC crowd, her name's Dana Nessel. She's helped kind of tank the criminal investigations. So from Obama to Democrat Governor Whitmer to Democratic Attorney General Dana Nessel, I think so many times with Flint and so many other things, it's just people wear their blue hat, people wear their red hat, and they don't want to see anything in the middle. But with Flint, this is a bipartisan scandal. It's a bipartisan cover-up. Yes, it was a Republican administration locally that presided over this, but like you said, Obama's EPA, they could have stepped in. Based on my reporting, Obama's EPA knew that the state of Michigan's environmental department was basically covering this up in real time. And instead of stepping in, the EPA notifying Flint residents your water is toxic, they looked for legal opinions, the EPA, to see if they could take over. And they just kind of sat on their hands. They did not notify the residents. In my view, what is the point of having a federal government if they're not going to step in, in an emergency situation like, water is kind of life or death.
People inside the United States don't have access to clean drinking water. It's amazing just to even think about that, let alone how long it's endured. Now, just to that point, you referenced earlier the fact that this is actually ongoing. And I know when I first heard about your book coming out, I think in some part of my mind, I had assumed, without necessarily having heard, but just because so little attention gets paid to this, that at some point it kind of got gradually resolved, that there may still be problems with the water supply, but by and large that crisis got resolved. And by reading your book, I learned just how little has actually been done, how much work there still is to do to get these people who live there a healthy, clean supply of drinking water, again, inside the United States. And there was this NPR article, I think it was from April of 2024, that's headlined 10 years after Flint, the fight to replace lead pipes across the U.S. continues. So, Jordan, this is the thing that I think is most interesting about this story, most horrifying about it, is that we are a country, the richest country on the planet, which is why we spend by far the most amount of money on our military, have the most foreign investment, have the most billionaires, etc. And at the same time, we cannot seem to just build basic infrastructure, not just for roads and airports and the like, but for people's basic health, to give people clean drinking water in the United States. To me, it says so much about the ruling class and its mentality and its priorities. What does it say to you about them?
Yeah, and I also want to zero in on something, because you said I just assumed it was being fixed, and that's, it's out of sight, out of mind. When the media stops covering things, people just assumed, all right, it's got to be getting fixed. I mean, this is a massive cover-up. I don't say that to sell books. Based on my reporting, this makes Watergate look like child's play. I mean, Watergate was a bunch of knuckleheads that broke into an office.
Describe some of that cover-up, because obviously your book goes into it at length, but just give people a sense of what you mean by that.
There were politicians who paid off sick Flint residents to keep them quiet. So political payoffs. You had politicians destroying their phones right before the launch of a criminal investigation. I mean, imagine if officials in the Trump administration, if their phones were erased around the time that COVID became a thing. Can you imagine the freak out on MSNBC? That happened here. Nothing was done about it. You had witness tampering. You had residents, top activists, their car brakes mysteriously being cut. You had residents being surveilled by the state government. You had the former governor of Michigan, based on my reporting, actively presiding over a cover-up along with his top officials to stop residents from learning about the deadly Legionnaires outbreak. That was the waterborne pneumonia that killed a lot of people. So from payoffs to destruction of evidence to witness tampering, I mean, I've been told by people in film that you could not make this stuff up. And there was also a major financial scam, a privatization scheme to privatize the water system in Michigan that most people don't know. That was the dark underbelly of the Flint water crisis. That's why Flint was even using this Flint River in the first place, because a new unnecessary water system was being built. And in the short term, they said, we'll just use the river that GM and every company has been dumping their crap in for 100 years. And we'll just use the water plant, which was the equivalent of these Boeing planes that are falling apart midair. The water plant was not equipped to treat the water. So there's multiple layers. Federal government, like I said, the EPA knew there was a problem very quick and sat on their hands. State government covering it up. Also, Wall Street banks were involved with this because they issued bonds, municipal bonds, for that new water system and helped create kind of this, not to get too in the weeds, but there was basically a financial fraud to create a fake emergency that would allow Flint, which was nearly bankrupt during this time in 2014, to borrow $100 million. So the media has basically reported this as, oh, this was some kind of tragedy born from a city trying to save money. It's actually the opposite. This was a massive for-profit. This was not to save money. This was to make money. And that's why today, 2024, I'm still fighting with the Democratic Attorney General of Michigan, because the investigation is over. The Democratic Attorney General, it's all laid out in the book. She kind of sabotaged the investigation. She fired competent prosecutors that were building a actually strong case against the Republican governor for involuntary manslaughter, which would have been a first in American history. They were also, based on my reporting, close to filing RICO charges. That's financial racketeering, which first became a thing in the 1970s to go after organized crime. She fired those prosecutors, she dismissed charges, and she did not pursue the financial charges. Based on my reporting, it seems because the state of Michigan would face hundreds of millions of dollars of liability if that financial case went forward, and the banks, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo in particular, could face hundreds of millions of dollars in liability for their role. So the short answer is essentially the media in America chooses not to cover things after the initial explosion, whether it's a mass shooting, a railroad blowing up with toxic chemicals, or a city being poisoned. Yeah, they'll continue covering it, maybe do an anniversary special a year later, 5 years later, but the deeper dive investigation, that generally doesn't happen anymore. And that's why this city, 10 years later, let me repeat, the infrastructure has not been replaced in Flint 10 years later. They still have mostly corroded, damaged pipes delivering their water. They also, all the criminal charges were dropped. They don't have free health care. And I talk to residents that are going bankrupt because it's very expensive when you've been poisoned. Cancer, liver problems, kidney problems, cognitive problems. And then add on the fact that they are, cancer is through the roof in Flint, and the media, I've seen headlines, well, could it be from the water? I mean, it's certainly not from the weather. So I hope that, through the book, people realize that, yes, this is about Flint. The book is about Flint, but this is about something much bigger. The United States government, Republican, Democrat, together, through a financial scheme, they basically poisoned a city. And 10 years later, they have basically covered it up, and they are allowing the residents to slowly die. And I'll just add, this playbook is currently being used in other places. If you recall, in East Palestine, Ohio, which voted for Trump by 70%, a conservative area, poor, mostly white people, Norfolk Southern, they unnecessarily detonated 5 rail cars that were carrying toxic chemicals over a year ago. The residents are very sick. I was just there a couple months ago. I got sick. I'm talking to a man who got double breast cancer. I'm talking to an 18-year-old girl who was healthy before, now having seizures. At resident after resident, many different symptoms and illnesses, and the EPA and the state government are doing the very same thing they did in Flint. Nothing to see here. So,
as you said, it follows the same playbook in the sense that there was this explosion of attention. Politicians went there for the first week or two to exploit it when there are cameras, and then cameras kind of lose interest, go on to something else, and then the problem continues unresolved. And what you said about your book is exactly what I was going to say, which is obviously you learned everything there is to learn about the crisis of poisoned water in Flint and the indifference of the ruling class. But to me, it's really kind of a massive insight into how the bipartisan ruling class functions, not just here, but in general. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.